Good morning. Welcome to the September 27th, 2023 Finance Committee for the Lee Summit School District. We'll begin with item 1.01, contracts $15,000 and less. Ms. Pruitt, if you would please open that. Items on the list are fairly typical for this time of year. There are a handful of renewals and new agreements under this threshold. Are there any questions regarding the items that are on this list? All right, thank you. Moving on to item 1.02, contracts over $15,000. I believe all the items that are on this list will be discussed later in this meeting, with the exception of the enrollment of education services, which is a renewal, and it's actually a decrease. Before we move on to any of the other items, are there any questions about that particular renewal? All right, hearing no questions, we'll move on to item 1.03 and Ms. Battaglia.
There we are. Sorry, technical difficulties. Good morning. This is our annual bid for inventory supplies for art and PE. And you might think those are kind of strange ones to put together, but a lot of the vendors that are attracted to this bid do supply both of those types of items. We had a good turnout for this bid. We decided to go with a primary vendor, school specialty, with 4 secondary vendors. Not any one vendor, of course, could supply everything that was needed. And in the art world, we have a lot of items that are no substitutions, and there are some brand names like Crayola and some others that, you know, our art teachers have kind of gotten together and decided that that is the best item for the application that they are using it for. So that's really all that we have on that. Like I said, a primary vendor is school specialty with 4 secondary vendors. I believe they are National Art and School Supplies, Southwest Binding and Laminating, S&S Worldwide, and BSN Sports and US Games, for any of those items that our primary vendor would not be able to provide us. Are there any questions? Okay, then I'll just roll right into the next one, if that's okay with you, Dr. Shelton. 1.04, inventory office supplies, same situation. It is our annual bid for office supplies that was bid out in August. We had a great turnout of vendors for that one as well. And it was decided that we are recommending a primary vendor for the majority of the items, which would be Staples Contract and Commercial LLC. That particular bid is a co-op contract, as well as school specialty, which I had failed to mention on the other one. They both have co-op contracts. And then, you know, a secondary vendor for this particular office supply bid would be school specialty, Quill, and then SRA Office Solutions, which I believe is a new vendor for us. So those 3 are going to be the secondary vendors, with a recommendation to go with Staples Contract and Commercial for the primary vendor. Any questions on that one? Okay.
All right, moving on to item 1.05. This is our bulk mailing services. Every day, all mail items come to central office, and then they're picked up by Casey Presort. We put the service out to bid. Had a couple of responses, two responses. One response really didn't meet our needs fully. Casey Presort's response did, and so we are recommending Casey Presort to continue this service for the district. To give you some context, last fiscal year, we spent just under $27,000 with Casey Presort to sort and mail, but once again, bulk mail our items. We would anticipate a very similar number, an amount for this coming school year. Any questions? Moving on to 1.06 Midwest bus services. You may recall that a year ago, we brought forward a request to purchase 23 diesel buses. This is in line with that continued effort to keep our fleet up to date. As you may recall, in 2013 or so, we purchased a large number of buses. Those are coming to end of life. And so this request is to purchase 20 buses, Type C diesel buses, through Midwest Bus Sales at a cost of just a little over $2.9 million. As far as a funding source for this, if you may recall that here recently the state has fully funded transportation, and that increase in funding just offsets this expense. So in round numbers, we expect an additional $3 million from the state in transportation funding. So this will offset this cost. Any questions?
I do. So the 3 million is additional to what we already received,
So
or what we were receiving last year?
well, going back a couple of years, actually. So about 2 years ago, we were being funded, once again, just for round numbers, about 20% of what the state should reimburse us. But now we are getting full funding, which is really 75% of what of our expenses. So, and that started not this fiscal year, but last fiscal year. So last fiscal year, that additional revenue by the state helped offset that purchase of 23 buses. This year, that cost is that additional revenue will offset this cost. So it's not an increase to last year, but it is an increase to traditionally what the state has been funding for transportation. It's been a number of years, to be honest with you, the state hasn't fully funded transportation, well, decade plus in the state. And then with recent state revenues and surpluses, they've allocated additional funds to transportation reimbursement.
Board member, I'll add to that. So if I go back to 2008-09, we received 2.9 million in transportation, and that kept decreasing until the point in around 2020, we were down $1.6 million. So they were in the teens on percent of funding when state statute says they should be 75%. But because of their excess, they told us last year it would be a one time, but they ended up making it 2 times. I don't know if we can rely on it being there in the next budget for next year, but we have had it increase to 75% for last school year and this current fiscal year as well. And that is at about $3 million additional over what we had been receiving in the many years prior.
So what is the total that we receive from the state?
Nathan, are you on here? Do you have that number? I just looked, I pulled up my sheet that I keep track of it. FY23 is not entered yet. So I don't have the exact number we end up receiving.
It's a little over 5 million. If you give me,
That's fine. It doesn't have to be
So I
exact.
can
I
do
was
it
just
for you.
curious what
Yep.
percentage we're using for new buses. So that's fine. You don't need to get like
Yep.
onto the exact.
Yeah, it's a little over 5 million this year.
Okay. So next year, are we doing another 20 buses? Because I know we have over 200 buses. Is that?
Yeah, roughly 170 buses. And we we've had to catch up a little bit. So our plan though is to begin purchasing about 15 buses per year. Once again, about 150 or so buses, 170 buses that have a life expectancy of roughly 10 years. Sometimes we can squeak a little bit more out of them. So if we purchase 15 buses a year, that gets us on a good rotation of keeping our fleet up to date and not having to make a huge capital outlay to replace a large number of buses. So this has helped us get caught up a little bit, but then what I would expect to see in the coming years is about 15 buses per year.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? All right, moving on to 1.07. And Ms. Denalia, you're here.
Yes, I'm here. Good morning. Our nutrition department has outgrown our current warehouse freezer space. We are kind of busting at the seams, and in order to continue to supply offer versus serve meal service for our students and all the choices that we offer, we had to secure an outside source for us to be able to store our excess frozen commodity items. We receive those items once a month. Those are ordered a year in advance, and we just didn't have enough room to be able to store it all. The location is an independent, so it is close. So it's not too hard to get the product back and forth as we need it. And the minimum monthly fee will be around $3,000 with our current needs, and can go up to, I'm estimating about $4,000 a month, March through May, because that's when we get in a lot more commodity items, because we can't get them in August, September, and October. So we have to get them in at the end of this school year to start for the next school year. A lot of the information on this contract it's for the larger companies, larger restaurants that store items in their warehouse, whereas ours are just going to be simply 20 to 25 items. So it's a really simple contract, and it can be terminated at any time with 30 days notice. We are hoping in the future to expand our freezer so it can meet our needs. Any questions?
What is that long-term plan? Is this something we're going to do for several years, or what is this? Probably a Dr. Shelton question.
I'll let Dr. Shelton answer that.
That is a great question. No, our hope is to expand our current freezer space. Currently, we have about 1,200 square feet. We would hope to, if not, probably roughly double it, at a minimum 600 additional square feet, but probably an additional 1,200 square feet to double that space. To do that, though, we're going to have to find a way to increase overall warehouse space in the district. So as part of our comprehensive facility master plan, that will be one of the topics we tackle on how to expand overall warehouse space in the district, so that then we can expand our freezer space at the current location. Hope, and to your point, my hope would be in the next 3 years, give or take a year or two, that we would have this opportunity to expand that space.
And board member Eslick, let you know, we did pursue about 10,000 square feet of space last year to see if we could lease. It did not work out and fit, so it could be a 2025 bond issue piece as well.
Right.
Okay. So I was just curious about like mobile freezers. So what's the benefit of doing this versus like dropping a 40-foot shipping container sized freezer that's close to the, I'm sure you guys looked lots of options. I'm just curious, why not something like that?
We actually did look at that option, and that was to put like I say, a freezer truck or semi, if you will, that you see. And really it was a power issue, and Kyle, you're on this call as well, but it was being able to run power to it with the current source that we have at the warehouse.
Well, that makes sense. Okay, gotcha. So like 5 years or so, hopefully.
Well,
the next
I hope, and I would hope that would be the longest term that we would have to be involved in this relationship. But once, we do have a real estate broker who's constantly looking for warehouse space for us and has presented us some options that we're going to explore here in the near future. And if we can get that secured, then that would allow us to expand the freezer space at the warehouse.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Moving on to 1.08. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Whaley and Ms. Witterson.
Good morning, everybody. This item, it's a 3-year agreement for network access control plus the server resources that we'll take to run that. And those server resources will also help us with our overall data system or data, our disaster recovery and virtual environment servers. They'll help those run a little bit better as well. Want to point out, this has actually been on the roadmap for the district with our cybersecurity plan for a couple of years. And so it's taken us a little bit longer to bring a proposal because we want to make sure that A, we were able to handle the workload, B, we were going to get it right the first time. And also, as you know, Kenzie's team has been working with different vendors, talking with different folks to talk about what exactly this involves. And it's a complicated system, but it's certainly going to up our cybersecurity game with regard to how the network is accessed. So with that, even though we've been playing it for a couple of years, last year, the federal government released a state and local cybersecurity grant program, and they sent that money out to the states. And the state of Missouri had to put, the program requirements and the application process together. So it worked out kind of nicely that we hadn't done it sooner because we were awarded that grant, and they will reimburse the district up to $200,000. It's a 10% match, but that's going to help us on the money side, obviously. So existing technology budgets, again, it's something we've been planning for a couple of years that we're now bringing, and Kenzie's on to obviously answer any technical questions if there are any.
I don't know what to ask because this is not my area. So I'm just going to trust that you guys know what you're doing.
I will say, Dr. Whaley and Mrs. Witterson have spent a significant amount of time, and they really are experts in this field, not only locally here in our school district, but around the state and around the region. And this is cybersecurity is one of our focuses this year in regards to preparation for emergency operations planning. So appreciate all that they're doing to help keep our data, our students, our staff safe.
Thank you.
Well, you know what? I will say one thing on that topic, because what I do know, just really for the benefit of anybody listening and wondering why we would spend so much money on something like this, but I've seen large businesses completely disabled from cyber attacks. It happened to Truman Hospital a couple of years ago, and they paid. And I don't think any taxpayer wants to pay for someone to hold our district hostage, especially since so much of what we do is networked. So I think this is a great upfront investment to prevent something like that from happening and to protect our student and staff data and information. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 1.09 and turn it over to Ms. McMillan.
All right, good morning. So in this item, we are recommending to expand services at the district's Complete Health and Wellness Center to include mail order maintenance medication and physical therapy. So just as a quick reminder, the Complete Health and Wellness Center exclusively serves employees, family members, and retirees that are enrolled in a district medical plan. So our health center is operated by Premise Health. Basically, any services that you would receive at a doctor's office, our employees can receive at the Health and Wellness Center. So if you kind of think it's like a doctor's office, we can do just about anything at the Health and Wellness Center. So the mail order medication plans, the medications will be generic meds used to treat chronic conditions. So there's not going to be any controlled substances, antibiotics, basically anything to help prevent and maintain someone's health. So these meds will be at no cost to employees, and they can only be prescribed by one of the nurse practitioners that are on staff at our health center. So the medication, the actual cost, which we expect to be low since they are generic, will be a pass-through cost to the district with no markup. We will have to pay $1.50 in addition to cover the mailing fees that Premise Health will incur when they mail those medications. So basically what we are doing, since these medications would be filled or covered under the district's medical plan, we're basically shifting that cost from the medical plan to the health and wellness center. So now if we move on to the addition of physical therapy, we are recommending to add 30 hours of physical therapy at the health center for both personal health and for work comp or for work injury treatment. So with the work comp side, we are basically shifting the expense from workers' compensation to the health center, but we should see a savings with that physical therapy work comp cost, because right now we are paying $120 an hour for work comp physical therapy. With under the Premise Health model, we'll be paying about $103 an hour. So there will be additional costs to get the site ready for physical therapy. That's a little over $20,000. So switching to the personal health side, it's kind of that same mindset. We're shifting the costs from the medical plan, which will actually be lower, to the health center. Employees will see a tremendous savings in physical therapy. Right now, physical therapy out in the community can cost anywhere from $150 to $300 a visit, where at the Health and Wellness Center, the most someone would be charged would be $20. So we feel like that's a tremendous savings for our staff. We did share these additions with the insurance team, so they are also supportive of this recommendation. And with these two added services at the Health and Wellness Center, we are expecting our utilization to increase there at the health centers. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mrs. McMillan. We'll move on to item 1.10, medical insurance plans for the calendar year 2024.
Okay, very good. And I will try to keep this brief because we did cover all of this in detail at the work session that we had at the beginning of the month. So just a reminder, the initial medical renewal from Blue Cross required a 9.8% increase over our current plan funding. We worked with Blue Cross, talked with them. They came back to the district and said they could increase our pharmacy credits. So that brought the increase needed to 5.3%. So as a district, we looked at our aggregate stop loss coverage and reducing that up to 110% brings the final funding increase of 3.4. So the final renewal, which is supported by the district's insurance team, includes no plan design changes. We're going to maintain all 4 medical plans with Blue Cross, with the addition of a family planning benefit. We're going to keep the individual stop loss coverage at $150,000. We're going to increase the aggregate stop loss to 110%. We'll continue to get a wellness fund from Blue Cross of $97,000. We're going to set our funding where it is this year. We're going to set that between expected and maximum costs, which is about 3% over expected. There is a potential exposure to the district of 1.7 million if our claims run higher than funding. So if that happens, we do have our insurance reserve of 3.8 million that we can tap into. But if our claims are lower than the funding level, then we will just retain those unspent dollars. And really the exciting part is we are recommending that there be no change to employee, retiree, COBRA, and district premium. So our employees' premiums will stay the same, and then the district will fund the renewal increase from the funds that they have budgeted. And we would only use those funds if our claims experience warrants the expenditure. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, that's great news, Mrs. McMillan. Thank you, Moving on to 1.11, Great Beginnings Transportation Update. If you recall, last month we brought forward a proposal to the board to contract with an outside vendor to provide transportation for Great Beginnings routes. At the board meeting, the board tabled that agenda item and asked us to consider other options. So since that time, we have considered many options, actually, and they're listed out here. But what we're bringing forward is for us to take care of all Great Beginnings transportation in-house. We believe with the uptick in hiring of bus drivers and our current fleet that we could manage any transportation needs that Great Beginning has. Would like though to consider having an, I'll hip pocket or on the sideline assisted transportation on an as needed basis, maybe 1 or 2 vans that they would provide us in the event that our current staffing and bus fleet could not manage any additional students that we would need to route. Currently, we have about a 72-hour turnaround time from students being who request services to getting them routed, which, to be honest with you, is better than what we've been doing in the past. It's been about a week or a week and a half. So we've been able to reduce that time, that turnaround time from requesting transportation to getting transportation to 72 hours. Just as a little backstory, it takes us, 3 or 4 months to go from the RFP process to getting responses to selecting a vendor. And so when we started this process back, I'll say in the spring, we were having difficulty finding drivers. Our driver shortage was still an issue. And so interestingly enough, during that time, with pay increases that the board supported, as well as a change in the market, our ability to hire drivers has greatly increased. So we're able to keep this service in-house at this time, given that our staffing is maintained. But once again, need to have a plan B, if for whatever reason the hiring market changes. And so that's why we think having assisted transportation available to pick up routes if needed is a wise move. I will tell you, we're also considering the purchase, and you'll see that option on here, purchase of maybe a van or 2 to include into our fleet, and then hire a van driver. And that doesn't require a CDL. So the licensing is a little different. Our thought is that the hiring market might be a little more conducive to hiring a driver who doesn't require a CDL. So we are exploring other options, but the main message here is that we're going to do this in-house, but we do need to be mindful and have a plan B and plan C in the event that our in-house transportation isn't able to manage the workload. Board Member Eslick, I know there was a lot of discussion at our last board meeting about this topic. Do you have any questions or comments? And to be honest with you, I'm looking for a little guidance here. Do you feel like this is a direction that seems appropriate as we move forward?
Personally, yes. I really appreciate all the work that's been done to try to keep this retained under the LSR7 umbrella and not outsourcing for a number of reasons, but I think it's important to have that control. You never know what's going to happen to a third party.
Right.
I mean, we have it in-house and we can manage it. I think further up, obviously I'm not controlling this screen, but I think further up in this write-up, there was mention of hiring a specific router for Great Beginnings. And I think that's an excellent idea to help, because I know this is a very complex operation that has to run because there's morning routes, afternoon routes, and that system is always changing. So I think that's a really great idea. Just for the clarification for anybody who might be listening to the Finance Committee meeting, what portion of these expenses for the Great Beginnings transportation is funded by funds other than our own budget from LSR7?
That's a great question. So early childhood special education is 100% fully reimbursable. Now, I say that with this caveat. Our drivers who drive the Great Beginnings routes also do other routes within the district. And so if our drivers were fully and solely driving early childhood special education routes, we would get 100% reimbursement. But because we split their time and need to split their time because of our needs with other routes in the district, we get a portion of their of that cost back.
Right.
The wage and benefits for the driver, the cost and expense of the bus, running the bus. So we get a portion of that back, that expense back.
So if we're buying smaller mobility vans or smaller buses specifically for Great Beginnings transportation, all of that, if it's
Sure.
just being used for Great Beginnings, is attributable to that reimbursement program.
And I will add a caveat to that, board member. Like, we pay for it this year, we get reimbursed the following year. It's always in arrears. So it is a one-time hit to budget, but then we get reimbursed the following year. And there is always a caveat that they wouldn't be reimbursed, but in my entire 22 years career, they've fully reimbursed everything we've asked. Sometimes they'll pick on something like I've built a early childhood center one time and they wouldn't pay for the flagpole. So every once in a while there's something small, but it's usually very small that they won't pay for. So we prorate it if it's prorated. We prorate people's time if they're doing multiple things, but we pay for it in the current year and get reimbursed the following year.
Well, honestly, that's another reason to me to continue to retain control over the program, because if you have a third party, I realize we have contracts, but if we have no other options and the contract expires and they want to increase it, and maybe the funding does go away, and then
Right.
that's going to be a hardship for the district. At least we can control the costs and our needs and have complete oversight over that entire process. I don't really have a problem with using assisted transportation, kind of in the same way that I think it was Ms. Sanders mentioned that we use some third-party transportation services for our McKinney-Vento students. And that's just kind of a ad hoc as needed. I don't personally have a problem with that. And I'm sure that some of the other board members, can't speak for them, but
Right.
just from the conversations in our last board meeting about this topic, I think the group will probably entertain this option a lot more. So I appreciate all the work that's been done on this. I think it's a really good outlay for what's coming. So thank you.
You're very welcome, and we appreciate the insight of the board here, because it did result in us going back to the drawing board and really finding, I think, what I believe to be a better solution moving forward overall for the district. I would say, right now, once again, we're able to handle the needs of the district in this current model. We may, once again, if we get to the point where we can't, we will bring back a solution. And that, once again, that solution may be an outside vendor. That solution may be purchasing some vans, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I say purchase or maybe even lease some vans. So.
Sounds good. Thank
All
you.
right. Very good. Thank you. Moving on to section 2.01, architectural services proposed for the 2025 bond issue. Mr. Grill.
Yeah, thank you. This agenda item is related to assigning architects for the potential 2025 bond issue. As you may know, we have started our community engagement process. The District Comprehensive Facility Master Plan team had their first meeting last week, and we are beginning our work to figure out which projects would be recommended to the board for approval. And so we expect within probably the next 4 to 5 months that we'll be through that process and have some projects identified to recommend for approval. So as we do that, we will assign those projects to these architects, and then the more formal contracts that are project specific will be awarded. So we did advertise an RFP and received 8 responses. We shortlisted those down to 4, and we had an interview team of 11 team members that you see listed on the agenda item. We interviewed those 4 firms, and have recommended that 3 firms be assigned projects. So Dake Wells, Insight Design Studio, and Multi Studio were all really excellent, in their presentation and in their abilities. The team was really impressed with all 3 of them. So with that being said, I will be glad to answer any questions and turn it back over.
Mr. Guerrero, thank you. You know, this process is outlined very clearly in state statute and board policy, selecting architects. And so we've followed that process, and I think it's brought us to a very good end.
In the next agenda item, the 2020 bond budget update. This budget update is still very consistent with what we showed last month. So if you'd like to take a look at that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Guerrero, I do want to point out that we, from the last month to this month, that we've seen a reduction of the overall balance, if you will, of about $775,000. We're standing, and Ms. Pruitt, if you would go all the way to the bottom, as we sit here today, we're looking at $3.1 million in balance.
Mm-hmm.
I know we haven't received final pay apps yet, and we always hang on to some retainage. How much more do you see coming in as far as expenses?
All of the construction cost has already been encumbered, so it's accounted for on this project. So there will not be any additional sizable construction cost. The most of the money left to spend is just in furniture and equipment, and that's what the reduction has been recently. We all along have our target has been to end up with a couple $1 million left in this bond issue that we can apply to capital projects. And so that is still our goal.
And thank you for highlighting that. So any remaining funds will be used on capital projects as well as improving security around the district.
Yeah.
Okay. Any additional questions? All right. Moving on to section 3, finance, 3.01, and this section will be directed by Mr. Holder.
Good morning, everyone. First item that we have is our transfer of funds. If you recall, we did not have one for the month of July, which is not uncommon at all. And this month we do have a small transfer to make. Then as we go through the year, these numbers will get a little bit larger and are fairly consistent from month to month until June, at which time we have a much larger transfer. So for this month, it's a small amount, $360,056.99 is the needed amount to transfer from general fund to the special revenue fund. Any questions on that? All right. We'll look at the revenue and expense report next. This is through August. And I would, just a word of caution when we look at August, we are 2 months into the fiscal year, so we are a month better than we were in July, but it is still extremely early. And some of those variables that come up, can make a difference when you're looking at percentages. And I'll speak to a couple of those as we go through the sheet. But really, if we look at our revenue, you highlight where we are now on a percentage basis, where we were last year, we're a little bit lower. Really, that is almost 100% attributable to an invoice. We were working to make sure our numbers were exactly correct. As most everyone knows, we have the shared space at the STA MIC campus with UCM, and UCM helps support our expenditures there as it relates to operations, and then also the lease, part of the lease that goes with the building that is a fund for expenditure. So they reimburse us twice a year for that. And so we expect to receive that in September. Last year, we received it in August. So that is one of those small variables, but it's a six-figure variable. And so that amount alone, if that gets plugged into August numbers, basically we're tracking exactly as we would be last year with revenue. Also, just want to highlight with the bond, you can see they're very positive from what we budgeted. That's through 2 months. Now, we did have a term investment that we matured in July, so that helped bump that number up. You can't average that number to get our average, but I'm very confident, we will eclipse 500,000. We're going to work hard to get that number, maybe close to $750,000, possibly even higher. It just depends on how the pay apps roll out. But back to what Mr. Grell said just a few minutes ago, anything that we can generate now is going to help go to that capital projects fund that will allow us to do a few more things with those remaining bond funds. So that's very positive news. And then capital projects, that goes back to what I just said about the invoice with UCM. When that comes in, that number will again be very closer to what we expect in our capital projects. Moving over to the right with revenue, again, 2 months into the year, but nutrition services, just a reminder, last July, so July of 22, we received a large payment that the state was not able to send us. It should have come in June, but it did not arrive. And that was not just a Lee Summit thing. That was all school districts did not receive it till July. And that was back under the pandemic provision of being reimbursed at the free rate for all meals. So that's why you see that when you compare it to last year, such a big percentage increase for revenue. But we're tracking right where we should be there. Activity is going to vary again from month to month. And then before and after school services, we will watch that a little bit. I would anticipate that Bass will come down as we go through the year. We may we'll have our 12-month true-up meeting here in the coming weeks, so that may cause a little bit of an increase in the expense, but as then we go through the next several months, we should be in better shape as it regards to the before and after school services. Going down to expenses again, if you look at our operating totals, we're running a little bit ahead in Fund 1. Fund 2 really is tracking very closely to where we were last year. When we look at Fund 1, the operating fund, we had quite a bit of technology expense, which we did anticipate. But as you would expect with technology, you want to receive a lot of that before the school year starts, all right? Because it's a lot harder to roll out and implement mid-year than it is at the beginning of the year. So quite a bit of those technology expenses hit this year. As when we go back and look at last year, during the same period, we just didn't have that much in FY23. One thing I will say that is a small silver lining and positive so far, and again, 2 months into it, but our utilities are actually down slightly as compared to where we were at this point last year. So that's good news. Moving across then to nutrition services, again, tracking right where really we thought it would be. Activities down, but that would be expected because revenue's down a little bit as compared to this point last year. And then Bass, again, expense a little bit down compared to where we were at this point in the year. So that's a good thing. Our restricted fund balances, again, nutrition remains very healthy, not unexpected. Again, of course, that it would be lower than last year, but we'll monitor that as we go through the year. But nutrition services, anytime you have a fund balance there in the positive, that is a good thing. Activities in the foundation, that will fluctuate again from month to month. So just a reflection of being up a little bit compared to where we were last year. And then Bass remained very stable July to August of this year. We're a little bit, again, lower than we were at this point in 2023, but we'll continue to monitor that. And as we know, as we go through the year, that will improve a little bit. Overall fund balance, again, from a dollar perspective, very similar to where we were last year. Again, if you factor in the invoice, we would really be a little bit ahead of where we were at this point from a dollar perspective. And again, that will fluctuate, especially early in the year as we get more towards March, April of this fiscal year. Then that's when we really know, and we'll have a much better idea of where that overall fund balance will end up. Any questions on the revenue and expense report? All right, the investment report, just a couple of things I wanted to highlight here. We did have a treasury that matured about a week and a half ago, as well as one that is coming off at the end of this month. If you look at those rates of return, the 0.125 and the 1.375, we are in a much better position to improve on those. And then if you even look, go down a little bit further, you see the CDs that come off in October, November, even some of the treasuries as we get into December, January, March, you see those interest rates. So we have a real opportunity here in the next 6 to 9 months to improve our cash flow. With UBS, just a reminder that is cash flow that we receive monthly. So that is a good thing. That is income that we can expect to receive. Just a positive note I want to highlight there. We have, as compared to January. So in January, our 12-month cash flow from just these investments with UBS was anticipated to be $325,000. Now that is $613,000. So we've made significant progress from January to now. And as you look at what is coming off in the next 6 to 9 months, and even if we compare January to January, I'm confident we're going to more than double that, just looking at that 12-month window. So positive news there. You can see going down to the very bottom, the bond proceeds. Our current balance, $24.28 million. So when I talk about the remaining income that we can earn, that is based on that right now, $24.28 million. That will obviously from each month come down a little bit as we spend those remaining proceeds, but you can see at that interest rate, that's where we're hoping that we can continue to build that, and we'll definitely exceed 500,000 and hope to get close to $750,000, if not better, by the end of this fiscal year. Any questions on the investment report? All right. The next item is our balance sheet. And really, this is just a reflection of fund balances, where we are to date. You'll note that P-card payable, again, liabilities there, that is going to fluctuate month to month. That is totally a function of the time of year as it relates to spending. As you can imagine, August, getting back to school, more spending than you might have in March or February. And the other piece of that, just a reminder, is timing. It depends on the cycle. We cycle weekly, and so depending on when that hits at the end of the month, it could hit on the last day of the month, which means we're going to have a lot of liability hanging out there. If you look at the bottom of our fund balance, you'll notice the fund balance transfer. You'll see that reflected. And then you also notice in the activity fund, that is just a function of sometimes our activities will raise money and it goes towards a capital purchase. We encourage all of our activities, and we've worked with our ADs who have done a very good job of trying to communicate this out, that we if we're raising money in an activity fund, but it's for equipment over $1,000, we have to expense that as equipment, and the activity fund doesn't have a function to do that. So the 9,997 hanging out there, that will be out there as we go through this year. But then as we close the fiscal year, that transfer will be made back into Fund 1. So again, just a note there. And as we go through the year, you may see that balance change a little bit, but that's why it is there as a fund balance adjustment. Any questions on the balance sheet? All right. Next item we have is the tax rate for the 2023-24 school year. And so we had a fairly extensive discussion at a work session earlier this month. I also want to highlight that we also have a work session scheduled for tomorrow. That begins at 4:30, where we'll have a slide presentation and we'll go through this information much more in depth than we will right now. This is just going to be a little bit of a high level preview, but as you can see with the board agenda item and the narrative that we wrote, you can see the reflection of the assessed valuation increase. It was a significant increase in 2023 in Jackson County. Much of that was residential. And so you see that information reflected, but I do want to highlight at the bottom, the intent of the district is to roll back just as if we were applying the Hancock Amendment, and to take that rollback for us, that is over a 65-cent rollback of our operating levy. The total rollback is just under 60 cents, but that is a reflection of Prop C. We're on a partial waiver for Prop C. That is a calculation that is done by the state every year. And so that happens to be 5 cents lower than it was last year. That fluctuates from year to year. So the total rollback is just under 60 cents, but the actual operating rollback that we're proposing is over 65 cents. So Hannah, if you would go ahead and click on that PDF. And just to highlight, the information that I had there. Our new construction, if you go down, you can see the prior tax year on the right reflected in the new tax year, which is this year. The increases in real estate, that is both residential and commercial, and ag is included in there. Personal property actually decreased. The combined real estate personal property, though, when we look at it, and remember that's mainly Jackson County, a little bit of Cass, is up just under 25% for 2022 compared to 2023. As part of that total, just over 40 million, 40.22 million is a result of new construction and improvements. That number is actually quite a bit lower than it was last year at this time. We do anticipate, we're not exactly surprised by that, but, we also try to monitor carefully and make sure that new construction is coming on as it should in a timely fashion, which can be a struggle. At least it has been in the past. Going down to the bottom, though, is really where the rubber meets the road with the actual tax rate. When you look at the reduction, last year our levy was just under $5.31, the 5.3089. And this year we're proposing 4.7112, so a reduction of almost 60 cents. When you look at new revenue, you see a total there of 15.2 million. And this is, obviously a large number, but it's important to realize here when we look at new revenue, what we anticipated. Remember, we asked to raise our operating 20 cents. What you see at the bottom is actually required by statute that we put the new revenue from reassessment. But the thing that's important to realize here and understand is that that is a reflection of operating revenue. That's what the statute says you reflect. So debt service is not reflected here. If we showed debt service, if the tax rates were the same as they were, if we had not been at the ballot and our debt service was still 107, you would get the same number in new revenue. However, much more of it would be on the debt service side. When you look at that new revenue, just a reminder, that's 15.2 million. Now, 5 cents of that will go to capital projects. So that actually reduces that number down to about 14.8 million. As part of that, we knew with our salary enhancements, that's about 12.4 million. GCBA for years of experience for our teaching staff was about another 400,000. And then, of course, we are not immune to the price increases that we all experienced on a personal level in our households. That affects us as a district as well. We pay for those increases on the goods and services that we buy. So that new revenue does track with what we were anticipating and what we hope to receive to help fund those increases, but in particular for our staff and the salary and benefit increases for this school year. Again, tomorrow at 4:30, we'll go in depth a little bit, show some examples of how this actually will apply. Just anecdotally, though, with the rollback in rate, an increase of around 13% for a homeowner would mean that homeowner for the LSR7 portion of their taxes would receive no increase. As you go on up, the average increase around just under 33%. With this rollback, it's not a 33% increase to the real estate tax bill. It's just over 17%, which is still significant, but it's obviously much lower than the 33%. So we'll get into that a little bit more in depth again at the work session. The tax rate hearing is at 6:30, and then at the board meeting, the board will approve the tax rate. Any questions on that? All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to section 4, future agenda items. This list is getting a little shorter as we get into the school year. Once again, the majority of the work that we do for purchasing happens in the spring and in the summer and early fall for the school year. And so this list will be added onto, but it will really be expanded as we get closer into the springtime again. Summer projects, 2023 projects. We provided this list beginning of the summer, and we've been chipping away at it. And this will be the last month that we show this as we've starting to wrap up and finalize some of these projects. The projects that are highlighted in gray were completed. The ones that are not highlighted in gray are still on the list. They will be done. It'll just be throughout the school year, or maybe over winter break, spring break, or obviously then again next summer. All right, moving on to section 5, other. We have Shannon Booth, Mrs. Booth on in the meeting, and she's going to take item 1.01. I'm sorry, 5.01. Yes.
In the July board meeting, I brought study.com for approval, and that was approved by the board, and it was a program to help with our family consumer science curriculum as a resource, but also the potential for other career and technical courses. We were going to look at that this year and see if it's something we wanted to move forward with for other programs. However, after the board meeting, the original quote that they had sent me had expired. So I asked for a new one, and there were some discrepancies from what our curriculum team had brought to me and what the company had brought to me again with the new order form. The amount was all the same, but what they had promised had changed. And so with a little negotiating and working with my team and the team at study.com, I was able to get that down to $8,000 instead of $18,000, and only focusing on family consumer sciences, which is what we originally had wanted it for this year. And I'm going to take the rest of the career and technical classes off because we were just vetting it this year for those. So that is the update. It went from 18,000 to 8,000, and we will get exactly the same thing that we originally had planned. I'm just taking some of the others off because they changed their structure and they really don't have what they had before for those other courses. Any questions?
So just to clarify, Mrs. Booth, that we're going to get all the services and product that we want, all the goods and services we want, but we're going to save $10,000.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good news. Thank you for your diligence and oversight of this.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to 5.02, the October Finance Committee date change. Mr. Holder and I will be out of town on October 18th. And so we are proposing that we move the October Finance Committee to October 17th, Tuesday, October 17th. If there are any questions or comments about that, we'll take those at this time. All right. All right, well, that concludes our agenda for today. Thank you for your time today. And if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us here at the school district.